Hey guys, hope you're all doing well. I'm going to do a little segment here on what's left of the Green Gangster. And this is the car that went into the nines with the E7 ported heads, a dual plane intake, and a 750 double pump carb. And it had a 5-speed and 430 gears. And I want to show you guys, it's not just all engine when it comes to running some decent numbers. You have to go and think about this. Suspension plays such a big part. Excuse me, fellas, I'm getting down on the ground here. Suspension plays such a big part, and time slip numbers. And the suspension right here worked pretty well for us. And there's times we were at the track where this car wouldn't like the track conditions. So, as you can see, he had adjustable uppers and adjustable suspension on this, fellas. And my son was always under this car working on what he had to work on to make it where it would hook. So that's the most important thing, guys. If you have a car that doesn't work, then what good is it going to do to put a motor in it that has big horsepower? I had guys back in the day that I was friends with. They'd be spinning their tires all the way down the road, and then they would say, yeah, I want to build a motor making more power. And I said, what about getting the car to hook where you're losing a half a second? Some guys wouldn't take that serious. They'd be like, I can't be losing that much. I'll bet you they were losing a second. Some of them guys that I know, that I talk about. But that remains to be seen. But I just wanted to give you guys a look at this because there's a lot of people asking questions and they kind of overlooked. Everybody's caught up into the engine, the flow numbers, camshafts. I've had hardly any questions, only a few people mention where it's important. If you can't get this stuff done first, and axles, you start making a car hook, them stock axles are only going to be good for so long. We've lucked out with them. We've gone pretty fast with stock stuff. With the stock axles, I think my son probably did the best with them. Well, when I say the best, he did better than any of our friends and people that he knows out there that was running the same things like the combinations that we had. And the only reason he was doing better at it is because there's no ever a magic wand involved with this stuff. I use that term a lot, magic wand, only because there's always a reason something is the way it is. It's the way he had the clutch set up, fellas. My son would set the clutch up on the loose side, and that's why the transmissions survive. So that's a good point to put in here while I'm doing this segment. A lot of guys don't realize that. They'll break their trans, and people tell you to put the stage 2 and 3 clutches in, and center forces are not too bad, but I mean, they have these Ram clutches, double disc and everything, and you don't need anything like that. This car's had nothing more than a slightly upgraded clutch at times, and for the longest time it was an Advance. I think it was an Advance or AutoZone clutch, stock replacement clutch. And that's going in the tens on nitrous. Matter of fact, I wrote it down here. This car, bone stock, has been 1040s with the stock engine and a 5-speed with 430 gears. So I wanted to do this segment here to let guys know it's not all about little tricks to the engine. It's not about everything you do as far as tuning. The suspension has a lot to do with it. And the only reason I say a lot to do with it, if you have a car that's spinning through the 60 foot and your 60 foot numbers are not good and you know they should be better, some guys don't know they should be better. They just, what they're racing, they just think, oh, I just put down a 1.9 60 foot. And they won't even know that the car should be putting down a 1.5 60 foot or a 1.4, depending on what's done to the car. But it's always going to depend on your situation where your combination, what horsepower you're making, and how you set the car up. The front springs play into it, your front struts, and it's just one of them deals. You'll have one guy tell you you need a real expensive setup like this, and then you'll see some guy go in 8 seconds with stuff like that. Guys always said with the South Sides, you're only good for 11 seconds. Even one of my friends that's really fast said that. Well, he's totally wrong. I know a guy in the 8 second zone using the South Side bars. So I don't want to scare anybody off thinking you need all this high dollar adjustable stuff either. Because if you don't know how to adjust it, and you're just a guy starting out, I want to add this into the segment. Don't be running out buying adjustable suspension if you know nothing about tuning the suspension. Pinion angle plays a lot into it. And the information's out there, fellas. You guys that are starting out, the information's out there on this stuff. Just look it up and take the time, because if you don't worry about this stuff first, well, I don't want to be the guy that gives bad news, but you're not going to ever have the car where you want it. And I don't care if you go out and buy a 1,000 horsepower engine if that suspension is not right. And here's my theory. On most cases, the more power you make, the worse it will be if the suspension is not right. I've never seen it ever be the other way, for somebody to throw a motor in a car that wasn't already hooking, unless they had a suspension that needed more horsepower because it was overkill. That's the only other way that would make any sense, would be that you had a suspension that was already set up, car making big power, and then somebody puts the engine in there that has less power. That'd be the only scenario that you would see that would have a reason to say, well, my friend had a car and the more power he put to it, the better it was. And the only reason I'm adding this in there like that is because I know there's going to be a guy out there that's going to say, well, my friend put more horsepower in and then it started hooking. That would be the only reason, and that's what's hard when I do these segments. I have to always think about what somebody's going to think or say, because you can only say or do so much when you're on here for 20 minutes. Guys, I want to tell you something. When people from YouTube are on these segments like me, you're usually going to forget more and leave more out than you're going to tell somebody. Well, I'll take that back. That's what I do. A lot of guys get their point across very quick, and they make all the major points count. I'm probably the guy that forgets more than I tell you on here. But I always hope that in my segments I tell you fellas something that will make you at least stop and think or help you, especially help you. I mean, that's why I take the time to do these segments. I didn't really want to come out here tonight. I had to force myself because I'm not out here doing anything. It's cold in the garage, and I thought, well, I should do this segment. I've been putting it off and putting it off and putting it off. And there's people asking me questions. I can't leave them guys hang. So, you guys already know this stuff. I hope you understand that I do these segments for guys that don't know this stuff. And they're the ones that need to know it. If I do YouTube and I'm teaching people something or just showing them something the way I do it, and you get something out of it and think, well, that's not a bad idea. Maybe I'll try that. That's good. But when I do these segments, it's basically for guys that need a friend or somebody to look up to that knows, that's been there. And the reason I use them words like that is because that's what I needed when I was a young guy trying to find out things like this, fellas. YouTube wasn't out there. And to be honest, a lot of the books I read were wrong. And there was the good ones too. It's just that sometimes you picked up a hot rod book and you read a guy's combination. I know this happened twice. You think you're going to learn something and you read a hot rod book or one of the other books similar to hot rod. I don't want to throw them under the table. But here's the thing. I knew two guys that had a car. They wrote their car up in the magazine and the combination was right on one of them, but they had the wrong engine. A guy I know had a Mustang back in the day. He was happy. They come up to him, did the whole segment on his Mustang, and he told him it was a 351 Windsor. When the article came out, it was a 351 Cleveland. And it's one of them deals, you might get lucky if you were to build a Cleveland and a Windsor the same way. Chances are, if you do a Windsor motor and it runs decent, you have the right combination. But when it comes to a Cleveland, if you put that same combination into a Cleveland engine, the Cleveland's going to ask for more camshaft most of the time than you would use in that Windsor. And I'm old school. I'm going back. I'm not talking about with an aftermarket head. I'm talking about with the stock stuff we ran back in the day. That's very crucial because when I speak, I leave things like this out, fellas, and then the guy will think he's out of his mind because my buddy's got a pair of AFR 205s on his, and that thing, he hardly needed the cam that big in that Cleveland he had. So they're the kind of things I got to be concerned about when I speak, fellas. I got to kind of go the extra mile and make sure that I'm telling you my scenario behind of what I'm telling you something about comparisons like that. So I hope that makes sense. I get off track when I do these segments and lose my train of thought. And I appreciate you guys putting up with that follow me. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. I did get a different camera so I could edit this stuff out when I make mistakes. And I'm not the best guy in the world when it comes to downloading things and the computer and doing the things these other people do on there. I really envy them, the ones that can really make it look sharp and do a super job on their videos. I'm not that guy, fellas. My nephew is, and he got me the camera, and he just recently called me up and said, well, I can see why you're having trouble, because the camera's doing all kinds of stuff, cutting off mid-segment. And I said, does it have a timer on it? It's starting itself over. I'll have to check it out, he says. So he gets on there and he checks it out. His is doing the same thing. He paid a lot of money for the stuff. He bought it for me, sent it to me, was all proud. And man, I appreciate it. He had no reason to have to do that stuff. Just the fact that he cares about his uncle. But he says, yeah, these cameras are hard. And basically, he feels kind of guilty about buying them. How are you supposed to know what works when you get something off the internet through one of these companies? I don't want to mention where he bought them because that's really doesn't matter. It's just a camera they sell, and some people might have that camera and like it, but my nephew, he knows how to do this stuff, is my point. I'm kind of baffling again because I'm trying to figure out how to make my point about this. If I get a decent camera where I can edit myself out when I make a mistake, I'll be able to go in more detail and hopefully do a segment that's more to the point. I watch myself back sometimes and I think to myself, I never got to the point of what I was going to say. Just like I think I said it in the other video I did recently when I discussed this with you guys last time. I said a segment about the Alphabet cams. I said there was only one reason people bought them cams. I never told you guys what the reason was, why they were so popular. And the reason was they were cheap. I think I finally did cover that in one of the other segments I did recently. But if I didn't, that's what I meant to say, fellas, in that. Anybody that's watched any of these videos and thinking, well, he never said this and didn't get to the point, all I can do is apologize, fellas. I always want to give you guys the best knowledge, and I'm leaving a lot of stuff out. Too much to make me happy, I'll tell you that, guys. Because you fellas that take the time to write me comments and stuff, and I know there's people that don't respond, and they might think that, yeah, he made the point, and then other people might think, well, he didn't get to the point. And that's the last thing I want to do, is not have somebody get what I'm saying, especially if it's something that's going to be worthwhile to you. So, anyway, guys, I'm babbling. I'm just trying to explain a little bit behind the scenes here when I do leave things out. And some people tell me I beat myself up too much, but you know what, guys? When I'm doing something for the public, well, I'll say my friends, because that's what you guys have been to me. I don't ever want to sell somebody short. So that's why this bothers me so much, and I go through the trouble of explaining this. So I hope you guys can bear with me a while longer, because I am checking into getting another camera. That's where I was going with this. But the thing is, with me, I'll tell you guys that now, and most likely you'll be watching the same phone episode in 6 months, because you've already been watching this stuff for a year, the ones that's been with me. And I can't tell you what that means to me, guys. All you fellas that are new subscribers, I want to tell you thank you. And all you guys have been with me, well, for almost a year. Fellas, I'm almost to 500 people. And you don't know what that means to me for one reason. And that's because when I do something that's not right, like I was saying, and I know it's not right, and don't make my point, and you guys still tune in to watch me, well, I'll tell you what it does to me. It tells me how special of guys you are. And that's how I feel. And I mean what I say. And I'd love to be able to tell each and every one of you personally how much that means to me. But anyway, guys, you've heard me babble enough. So I'm going to wrap this up. And I do hope in the future I can do better. And instead of being like a dog chasing its tail around in circles, I can make the point better, fellas. So have a good night, everybody. And always be careful, fellas, when you're working on anything under a car. Please. I've had friends get hurt seriously. I've lost a couple guys, and they knew what they were doing. The 1 5-minute or 2-minute or 1 minute that you're under the car, I'm just reaching under here to grab something. They're the ones that will get you in trouble, fellas. So please, listen to me on that, if nothing else, guys, okay? Don't trust your jack stands. Don't put faith in a jack. Make sure you always take time to have something else under the vehicle when you have it raised up. So I wanted to push that in there while I'm doing this. But one more time, fellas, have a good night. And I appreciate you guys for checking me out. Take care, guys.